Okay. Wow. So we frequent the same random obscure websites. We've never met. And Dan has the same conversation going on with both of us at the same time about our setups and about gear in general.
Pretty much.
Yeah, so here's how it works. I'll be talking to you about your rig, and then I'll go back to Jones, who also, you got to see his rig. It's similarly insane, and there's a concept to build this large thing that can do like everything there too, and have like the same conversations and talk about like the same exact gear. And one day he's like, "Hey, is your friend Bobby D?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" And he's like, "Oh, because the stuff you told me that he said about the MPC Live, I just read on this forum this exact same post where he pedantically cut up everything about the MPC Live and then told them exactly what they needed to do." And so yeah, there's
the moment that actually did it was the one that where it all came together, and I went like, all right, you are quite prolific, sir. It happened as soon as I went to, and this is a forum I don't frequent, but I went there because I was looking at samplers, and so of course the SP16 came up, and I went, well, let's go check out the Pioneer forums, and I saw all of the hatred and all the anger about the lack of firmware updates and features and etc. And of course, there you were with an intelligent conversation about what was wrong with this device and how they could make it better. And I'm like, all right, Dan, he's literally everywhere I am.
Yep, and that's when we figured out that you should be getting employed by all these gear manufacturers, because you have literally taken every piece of major gear that has come out in the last like 2 years, bought it, put it through its paces, figured out what's wrong with it, posted it, and then gotten pissed that they didn't fix it.
Yeah, and
beautiful.
Well, yeah, so I really want things to be perfect, and I'm constantly kind of like your friend here. What's your name again? Sorry.
Chris.
Chris, kind of have this conceptual idea of a perfect instrument that can do everything. That can blend, 15 years of DJing with 5 years of trying to be a pseudo music producer, but not do it in a way that's like locked to a timeline in Pro Tools for 8 days mastering. More like the sort of organic flow, and then get from like this half-cooked point in Ableton to mixing it with other pieces live. I don't know. Anyway, it's nuts, but I'm sure a lot of other people are on the same train. And I keep seeing these videos for these new products that are coming out, and they look to be perfect in every way. And of course they're not. None of them are. And I don't know why I still expect them to be, but I still have this faith that when somebody says we created this perfect box and here's a really sweet video showing off all of its features, oh, and PS, it does these other 50 things, I just sort of trust that it's going to maybe do the other 50. And that's where I guess I start the hunt is can it do the other 50? And it's not for the sake of proving them wrong or proving them right. It's because oftentimes the 50 things that it says it can do, combined with the new things that nobody else can do, like hits a nerve. And I feel like, ooh, if it does what it says, oh, that could be the answer to this. And it's not to say you can't make music without the right, you know what I mean? You can make music with almost nothing, but that's not the point in my head. The point is,
let's use, for example, the MPC Live. It's such a great microcosm of this whole conversation. So the MPC Live, they deliver this product, which is a drum machine, a sampler, a full-on DAW in a box with a battery, like a 6-hour battery. You can go out to a show and play an entire night at a bar with this device. Amazing. And it's using the MPC workflow. Love it or hate it, it is what it is, and that's a thing. It's very high quality. It's well built. I've taken it apart and put it back together again a couple of times, and it's a good product. But then they missed the mark on something as simple as MIDI clock.
Yeah.
And it's not even like a thing where they go, oh yeah, well that'll come in update 1.9 or something. No, it's just, yeah, it's a problem. It doesn't receive MIDI clock properly.
So welcome to my world. I bought one of the first MPC Lives, and I thought the same thing. It does it all. However, immediately I noticed, well, there's no phono ground on the back of this, which to me was, look, I get MPC's DAW, love it or hate it. I personally do not love it. That's because I have machine Ableton background. Whatever, I'm biased. However, you come from like this realm of hip hop history and you don't put a turntable ground on the back of your first standalone device. To me, that just means somebody wanted to say $4. I don't get it. But beyond that, I plugged it into my Era Serato at the time rig, and all it had to do was listen to the clock. And when I email these people and say, hey, it's not hearing my clock, they literally told me that, and I quote, "You're the only person that said this is a problem, so I think maybe it's not a problem." Like I made it up.
Oh, we've seen this exchange on the forum.
Version 1.1.
Okay.
Phonoground.
Oh, is that the MPC Live?
It is.
Yeah.
They already added it?
They did.
They added it.
To the hardware.
Did you happen to tell them, did you happen to say to them, hey, what the fuck, guys? Why doesn't this have a phonoground?
Yeah, like the first day they announced it, I was like, this should have phono. And then I got it in my house and I was like, this should have phono. So now you have it. So did they make a big announcement, or did they just sort of quietly...
They quietly rolled it out.
They quietly rolled it out. I didn't even know there were two versions of the hardware until you just spoke those words.
That was the first time.
Yeah, so did you even have the V1.0? Did you?
No.
Okay. So great. So yeah, if there is a job in this field, they're not intending on paying anyone to do this because we'll do it for free. So there you go.
Yeah, they're like, let's put up the product, not tell you when it's a beta. Bobby D will buy it. Tell us all the bugs.
Well, so it's just incredible, though.
Forum.
It truly is incredible, though, that you have a product here which is in its own right incredible. Like, take away all of the drawbacks, and it is a significant piece of hardware that you can do full music production on, and not just like, I'm making some tunes, but like, no, you could make tracks that you could then release out on a label on this machine.
In the box.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. It's well made. It's robust. I was able to take it across the country without any issue. It turned a lot of heads because it is a really nice device. But then something as simple as MIDI clock. Like, how do you miss MIDI clock, and how do you not have an answer for it? Like, when you release it 1.0, you say, okay, we realize we're having some issues getting this ARM processor in here to track properly with the lowest amount of jitter, and we're working on fixing it. And just be honest with your customers. Be honest with your community.
Yeah.
This is, by the way, something that MPCs have literally done since they've existed.
That's what makes it all the more disgusting, is that MPCs have been like the rock. Like, you know, when you want, you either use one of those ultra high-end, like $3,000 mini boxes or sequencers, or you use an MPC like MPC 60 or a Renaissance or something, and you go, yeah, this is an absolutely stable clock. I can judge all other instrumentation against this device.
Right. Yeah, a pocket operator for $50 can get PPQN and accurately track something else and not have to be the master. And literally every piece of MIDI gear with a MIDI in that I've ever fucking owned can take MIDI clock in and be the slave to something else. But apparently the only way to use the MPC Live still is as the master. And we found that out. We did a jam. He brought it over. By the way, it's beautiful how quickly he was able to get sequences going. Yeah, the SH101.
SH32. It's almost 20 years old. Do you know what it'll do really well? MIDI clock.
Yeah, it was really good at MIDI clock.
Back to that's about it. But it does that.
I appreciate that kind of snark.
Analog modeling synth from 20 years ago could do MIDI clock. It was revolutionary, not at all. Yeah, he was able to get sequences up super fast. He was able to step sequence them. He was able to throw waveforms onto automations so fast. Cool stuff where it's able to come out of that box, and we didn't have to rehearse at all. We were able to just put it together. But the first thing we tried having it be the slave. That way the MX1 could control the entire
as it is
showdown that we had going on.
Which is great for that. Yeah, couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it. Yeah,
all over the place. Yeah, it would be behind by like 2.5 beats. On an opening bar, it wouldn't receive the start signal correctly. It was most prominent when you're using it in clip mode, but it would still be completely unusable even in standard sequence mode. Yeah.
Now that it's really sad to me because I will admit that out of all the hardware I've bought and sold and returned, mostly sold over the last 2 years, the MPC Live is like a tank. It is very, very well built. I feel like if I spent the weekend with someone like yourself, like really wrapping my head around their architecture, I could get around it. But my problem was, I bought the MPC Live to use next to my turntables, next to my DJ rig. And And aside from the fact that it would not MIDI sync, I found that it was not, for me, a very fast, organic workflow, because you can't put a bass patch on pad 9 if pad 1 through 8 are drums. And to me, that's, I get that if you're used to MPC, that's fine, but I couldn't do it. So every one of my drum kits was on pad bank A for each program. And so I was like, why do you have eight selectors at the top for different pad banks if none of them are being, like, I can't use them unless I read a manual for 4 hours to figure out how to make program B go to pad bank B or whatever. Like, it just pissed me off.
Yeah, what they really need is like a live mode for the MPC Live, as ironic as that is, but essentially exactly that, where you could have a drum because I took some time to really understand the MPC workflow before I fully critiqued it, and so I understand now what a program is, what a track is, what a sequence is, and really what they should have done is allowed you to program, you know, a live mode specifically where it's not for writing, but it's for just playback, very much like the clip mode, but where you could have pad A or bank A be drum program 1, and you could have bank B be, you know, MIDI chromatic 2, and then you could have bank C be something else, and in that way it would have been amazing, or even mix clip with something else on different banks. Wow, that would have really made a difference. But even in clip mode, I did the same thing. So I had a show, a stream online called Arrival, that was about the arrival of this new piece of gear, and I was going to integrate it with my set and have a good time, and I put a bunch of, you know, just techno loops on there. I think I had some of the Riemann, you know, Volume 2, which were fantastic, and they'd add a little bit of flavor to the set. It couldn't track. I mean, because the DJ 808 that I use as my kind of master of my system, it only has MIDI clock out, and, well, the MPC Live doesn't do slave.
Right. And does the MPC Live, I forget if that thing has a tempo nudge or not. I don't think the version I had a tempo nudge.
It does not.
And I also had the DJ 808, which is pretty darn cool. And it's another, like, I feel like the MPC Live is a benchmark device, which, you know, like the first iPhone had a lot of bugs compared to the iPhone 10, but every phone after that kind of had to follow. And I feel like the MPC Live is that. Like, they've set the standard. Everything going forward, the goal is to be a standalone, badass, multi-core thing. And that's cool for what it is. And I think in 5 years, we'll look back and go, wow, look how far this thing's come. But right now, it's just enough frustration that I couldn't keep it. I couldn't ride it out and get used to it.
I fully understand, and I'm ready to actually throw it on Craigslist or Reverb or something, because it's at the point where I'm going to purchase new gear that is, I know for a fact, 100% bulletproof and will do what I need it to do, and actually takes the role of the MPC in many ways, and that would be the Electron Digitact and the Electron Digitone. Those two together, I really don't have much use for the MPC. Now, the MPC can do basically arbitrary sample length, time stretching, and a few other things that the Digitact can't, but do I need that in a live set? The answer is probably no.
So just one quick interjection. So the adaptation to a new inside the box workflow, anytime you get a new box, it's going to require that. We bought at the same time, I picked up an Octatrack, and he picked up the MPC Live. I am keeping the Octatrack. I'm super pleased with the Octatrack. Electron is amazing. However, like that first month, it is the most anticlimactic piece of gear that you'll ever buy. Because you just spent $1,300 and it's like, yeah, I'm going to do some awesome shit with this. And then you turn it on, it does the pretty lights, and you're like, now what?
Right.
And then now I get to figure out how to launch this Russian ICBM using this panel from the Cold War.
You literally, the first thing you do is you walk away from it, and then you're like, okay, someone on YouTube has already done this. Let's go find that out. And that's when you run into Cuckoo and all these other YouTubers that are actually pretty awesome. And they do tutorials, and then you spend like the first month reading the manual, reading the additional guides, watching these videos, and you just start to absorb it, and you start to take. You also don't have any material. So for me, my workflow is I work out tracks in the DAW, and then I bust them into their substituent pieces. I put them into the sampler, and then it's fodder. Well, you don't have that day one. You have to take a look and figure out what it needs to really work, and then you start rendering that out and porting it into it. And you're doing that as you're learning. So what ends up happening is you set up a track, and you're like, cool, I got it. This is cool. And then you learn a new thing, and it's like, I got to redo literally everything that I already have set up. This sucks.
Right.
And so it took about 2 months until I actually had a good time on the machine. But that's, I think, common. You're really getting into an entirely new workflow. So I don't think that the experience of getting a new thing and having to wrap your mind around the philosophy and workflow that they've designed, I don't think that's necessarily a detractor, because any of these boxes to follow, if it is that landmark device, they're going to have to do that too.
If you're coming from if you're coming from middle of the road, you've used DAWs like FL Studio or Machine or Ableton, and you're coming into either the Octatrack or the MPC Live, it's very much the same learning experience. Like, the way MPC does things is frankly like archaic and bizarre. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense on its face, but once you understand its workflow, it's still not great, but you understand how it works. And then same thing with Electron. Like, I think that Electron has a little bit of an edge in that if you can wrap your mind around its bizarre way of doing things, it's very powerful. But it's a huge hump to get over, for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing is that Electron is trying to do more with less, right? So what they do is they take all their features and they say, all right, let's turn them all on at once. Let's see how much CPU they need and how many system resources. And that's all we're putting in the box.
Right.
So they're not, like, you could take the MPC and do like 128 tracks of MIDI or something insane like that.
Yeah, stupidness. Yeah.
And that's cool. Octatrack is like, hey, you get 8. If you're doing more than 8, you're outside of our philosophy. Look at the MPC.
Yeah.
And it forces you to work within those constraints.
Right. And I think fairly kind of in between something like an Octatrack and an MPC Live kind of falls that Torize that I complimented and commented on and went round and round with, which is, it's sitting over here right behind me. I love that thing. It's very limited. It's limited, but not compared to the Octatrack. It has 16, tracks per group. It has 16 pads, and you can do 16 scenes of 16 pads. So you can put 256 sounds in this thing, and you can do that many patterns too. But it is, maybe those numbers are wrong, but it is very limited in comparison to the MPC Live.
Let's talk for a sec about the DJS 1000, because that's on my radar big time right now. And what I want to understand is, why is it $100 cheaper than the Toriz?
I will tell you, I have both. And the DJS 1000 is actually in a box right now for the marketplace. Okay. Not due to any fault of its own. That thing, if you have CDJs or these nice new Denon players, which are twice as good, by the way. We'll get to that later. If you have any of those devices with that form factor, or even the 4-channel, the new DDJ 1000 controller, which I've also been looking at, although it's not standalone, so it's less sexy. But anyway, any of those form factors, the DJS 1000 fits that form factor beautifully. The differences, and I think the cost, comes down to the fact that there's no analog Dave Smith circuitry in the box. The SP16 has an overdrive.
It has a SEM filter, doesn't it?
This thing has a Dave Smith high pass and a separate Dave Smith low pass, and it has analog drive, and then it has one more.
That's the SEM chip, the CEM chip.
Is that what that's called? Okay.
Real quick, as long as we're on Gear-Splaining anyway, are you wearing focals right now?
Yeah, the Spirit
Pros.
Nice,
excellent. What do you think of those?
Oh, I don't know anything better than these. These are great. I bought them 2 years ago because a friend said, this is what you use for mixing.
Nice.
And he also sold me his CMS 65s for dirt cheap because he was in a pinch. So now I have a bunch of cool focals. Anyway.
Cool.
So yeah,
it's great to exploit your friends in a pinch.
Well, sometimes he's like, yeah, exactly. So,
so helps me.
Yeah. So I plugged the DJS 1000 next to the SP16, put them into a 2-channel tractor mixer, and I went to town just mixing the two as if they were records, and it was super fun. I got lost for hours. The DJS 1000 doesn't have that warmth, that analog feel that you can push. You can drive that knob, the drive knob on the SP16. When you use the filters on the DJS 1000, they sound cheap in comparison. When you pump the overall sound of one and then the other, you can feel the difference in the speakers. Like one has this beautiful warmth that the other one doesn't have. So if you need one that can sample live and it's like pre-configured to do 4-bar loops and kind of build your own remix deck, the DJS wins. It also has slightly bigger pads, which feel slightly better, but it has a pitch fader and a nudge button on the surface, which, I mean, for years I've been looking for the perfect sampler with a pitch fader and a nudge, and it has it. That said, the Torize has a nudge on the screen if you go to the right menu. And I find that being a DJ, it's really not hard to dial in the tempo, hit play, and hit nudge, and suddenly it's locked. So even being not in a Pioneer environment, I have zero issues matching that to the tempo. So if you want live sampling and you want the footprint of a CDJ, the DJS1000 is beautiful. And it runs basically the same interface, same GUI as the SP16 with minor limitations and tweaks. The SP16, the sample limit has been increased to 64 seconds, which is double that of the DJS. I don't know why they didn't just do it on both, but they're trying to maintain distinctions.
Wait, is that a sample, like one sample can be 64 seconds?
Correct, on the SP16. That said, they have 256 megs of memory, if I'm correct on that. So if you load a 64-second... Yeah, so to an extent, if you load a 64-second sample, you can't load a whole bunch of other long samples or you'll overload the memory. So you have to be careful how you use your resources, not unlike your Octatrack. You get a limit.
Yeah, Octatrack has 80 megabytes that allows for flex. The flex machines, you gotta start to get into their workflow. Flex machines allow you to do slicing and dicing, but most of the time you're actually going to use something called static, and that's unlimited, and that just comes right off the compact flash card. It doesn't get loaded into RAM. And you can do all the time stretching you want. You can do slicing and play off that. Just the big difference is you wouldn't want to do like a sample chain. So that's like a big thing for the Octatrack guys is they run 20 samples into one audio file, load that one sample in, and then pull those slices and play them all over the place.
One more quick jab at the MPC Live. No disc streaming. Now, granted, it does have about...
You can do disc streaming.
It has about 1.3 to 1.4 gigabytes of usable sample memory, but no disc stream.
I do like that you can put a terabyte solid state inside of it, but if it's not fun to use that terabyte sample, then I guess...
No.
Anyway, so a couple of other things. The DJS, they added another button. So on the SP16, one of the 4 main buttons is dedicated to track select mode, which puts the box in the mode of when you hit a pad, you see that information on the screen. The DJS 1000 got rid of that unnecessary button, and they added another mode, which I think is called Hot Slice. It's in the box, but one more creative mode. But to be fair, in a month of having it or 2 months of having it, I've never used that mode. So for what it's worth, I think they're both...
like the Serato Slicer?
It just slices your sample into 16 pieces automatically. You can go in and tweak the different breakdowns, but automatically it just breaks it into 16.
So the Serato sampler, I just wanted to hit on that really quick since it sounds like it's basically the same thing. What a cool feature that I absolutely never use.
Yeah. You get 64 slices of your sample, and you're like, oh, that's cool. Maybe we'll get around. Well, here's the thing, though. Serato Pro is coming out soon. Mm-hmm. Ableton 10 just dropped. I just downloaded 30 gigs of new content from 9 to 10. You have to ask yourself, and it's fantastic. I mean, the push implementation is insane. But you have to ask yourself, why would they have Serato sample in Ableton and have Link on both programs and already have this history of a failed bridge, which ironically, I was the first person on the forum saying this bridge is not working. And 2 years later, everybody else said, oh, shit, they're right. This doesn't work. That's not okay, whatever. But they have all these things that just speak to a connection in the future. And what a better way to do it than to say, Serato sample can run in Ableton, but you can access, the sampler channel of our sound card. So the new Rain 72 is going to have a sampler channel, right? Why not just put that in the sampler channel so you can use that cool plugin and use Ableton on a 2-channel battle mixer?
And how crazy is it that will probably happen? What you just described will probably happen before Native Instruments links their products.
Because they're never going to do it. Okay, yeah. Why would you not just make a machine deck inside a tractor? I've said it 1,000 times. I actually put machine on Reverb today, not because it's not cool, but because I've got 5 different beat machines, and the one that eats the most CPU when I turn it on is machine, and I just can't. I can't have it. It just chews up my CPU meter when I barely get to the point of really digging into my production process.
Yeah, Native Instruments, everything they do assumes that you have the newest CPU that came out when they released the product. No, 6 months after they released the product, the newest CPU. Yeah, I have Complete 11, and it absolutely boggles the mind how a simple drum sampler can use 30% of a CPU.
I have an i9 7900X overclock to 4.8 stable on an insane water-cooled system. And yes, opening up Complete 11, it's a task. Like,
yeah,
it's like firing up an electronium miner or something. You're like, Jesus Christ.
Well, and it's, for years they've had these videos showing machine and tractor playing together nicely on a set. And it's funny to me that I've watched these videos and I kept saying, well, there's got to be a way to make my, $3,700 computer, my MacBook Pro with everything on it, right? That's supposed to be so cool as of 2 years ago. There's got to be a way to make them talk. And I could never do it. And the other 2 months ago, I was watching a video on Native Instruments about machine and tractor together. And at the end of the video, and the guy was using a S8, which I've also used for a long time, put it through its paces, loved it, but had complaints. He's using an S8, which Dan informed me through a friend is very GPU intensive. And then he's using a Machine Studio, which is also very GPU intensive.
The friend.
Yeah. Oh, this is the guy. Cool.
Yeah.
So I'm like, there's no way he's doing this on this machine. It's just a 2017 MacBook Pro. And then at the end, the guy asks him, so how are you getting all this to run? And he picks up his laptop and there's a Mac Mini underneath it. He's like, oh, that's running tractor. This is running machine. Like,
that's what you got to do. You got to have two computers and you got to basically hook them up old school MIDI style, which works for everything except for MPC Live.
Well, now they have Link. So now you can arguably put them, but still, I'm like, I refuse to buy a second computer to run a Beat Machine when I can get a Torize or an MPC Live. Or as a good friend of mine reminded me yesterday, you love Ableton, you love the push, it's super stable. Your DJ rig is standalone. You have standalone hardware, synths, and beat machines. Just unplug the push and take it out to your DJ booth. And I did that today, and it was like, wait, I don't have to waste 2 hours bouncing my Ableton stuff into something else to play it. I can just plug Ableton in and use the push. And it was an easy fix. Like, it's cheap, comparatively. And if you like the workflow, like, I've been on this kick, like everything has to be standalone. And in fact, it doesn't. Like if the DJ rig is standalone, you can push Ableton to its max because the only thing your computer is doing is running push. So it's interesting to see these answers.
So now suddenly you're looking at a paradigm where your DJing no longer has a computer involved, but now you're re-involving the computer for Ableton as opposed to trying to do both things off the computer.
Exactly.
Which allows you to free up all this extra resource and allows you to actually do everything in a stable way.
Correct. And so instead of wasting 4 hours freeze tracking, right, which is my buddies, we keep coming back around to, well, you can bounce everything to audio, you can freeze track all your stuff. Yeah, you can do all that. But how, at what point are you no longer live producing and you're just, and it's not that you're not still doing stuff, but at what point have you lost that instrument playability portion of what you're doing? And now you're just hitting play in different scenes because that's all you can do with that one computer, right? Now I can just run the thing. And it turns out all the new DJ mixers that are digital have at least one USB connection in the back. And if you're not using it for Serato or Record Box or Tractor, guess what? You can route Ableton into whatever channel you want, which is huge. So
yeah, it's actually that's a pretty amazing little footnote is that all of these mixers and controllers and everything else, for the most part, unless they're really, really proprietary, they tend to expose all of their audio I/O and their MIDI, which is fantastic. I mean, you open up the DJ 808 in Ableton and it's like, oh wow, I have 10 inputs and outputs and they're all assignable. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
And speaking of the DJ 808, that thing is cool. It's like another kind of landmark product. However, they were way overdue with the nudge on the TRS. And the fact that the 505 has 8 voices on 8 pads and your flagship unit still does not, it baffles me. But I digress.
That one bothers me less only because of the 8 buttons that are across the top for Serato Sample, which now you can run all 8 of those without any issue. Now, you still can't use the original, like 808 samples in that same manner, and you can't control those signals individually with the channel faders that you have, those 4 channel faders. So I'm willing to accept that as a drawback, but what I'm not willing to accept is they made the pitch controls in the latest firmware way better. Like I was telling Dan about 200% better, which is still absolutely awful. They're just now usable. Like they do like 0.05 to like 0.08 ish, And they even have a little crappy algorithm running that if you fiddle around by the actual exact BPM, it'll eventually like start banging on Serato until it fixes it. So like you'll be at like 128.32, and it'll be like 128.3, 128.38, 128.27, 128.32.
Yeah, that's a Serato issue, right?
No, it's not. It's the 808 is not communicating
issue?
Correctly, and I'm willing to bet that they have 3 MCUs inside the 808. I've taken it apart and looked at it, and I bet the one in the mixer is probably running a little algorithm that if it sees you kind of dropping in that area for long enough, it'll just force a signal to Serato saying, set it to this BPM. Like basically sync it.
So I had that mixer from the time it came out until, I don't know, a few months ago anyway. And I played a really big house party. We have one per year in this giant, beautiful mountain town of Durango. And it's a good time. Everybody's here for the right reasons. And we get down and it's loud and it's got cool lights and big speakers. And I played on the 808. And the set was fine. Nobody else could tell, but I walked away frustrated because of those things. Like I couldn't get the tempo to lock where I wanted it. And I was really, really upset that in Serato, you can load a sample bank, but you can't save it and recall it. So when I dump my samples, they're gone. So to me, it was sort of, to quote my fiance, when I said I might swap these Denons out and try something else for the sake of testing, she was like, I've never heard you complain as much as when you owned the Roland DJ808, and I've never heard you complain less than when you've been playing on these Denons. So please don't buy another one of those mixers.
The 808,
but it's still super cool.
Oh, the 808's so frustrating, and it's so frustrating and so like such a livid topic because it's so close. It's like, you fucked up like 2 things or 3 things that aren't right, but they're not right, and I can't accept that.
Yeah, and that's enough. It's like half of these controllers and mixers and setups, if you're mixing 4 on the floor at 120 all the time hitting sync,
it's fine.
You're never going to know there's a problem, which is one of the reasons why half of these products make it so long before other people start complaining. But that opens the other door, which is the Era line in general, which if they had a proper sampler, and they have a new one, the 404A, it's not bad, but if they had
It's not Era, though.
Well,
they call it Era.
Well,
it doesn't even have USB out.
Yeah.
It just has
but
phono outs.
No, but what it does to be called Era is if you plug it into your TRS drum machine, you can sequence the sampler on your TRS drum machine, which is something, but it's not quite there.
That's something you should be able to do anyway, because those things should all have a MIDI note assignment, and those
true.
And the TR8 should have MIDI note assignments on its drum pad. So that doesn't impress me. In order for it to Era, what Era means to me is not that you also need to get the TR8. Because by the way, when you do that, you lose the functionality of the TR8. You're basically spending $400 for a step sequencer for your sampler when it should have come with one anyway to begin with, and you can just buy a Digitac. So to me, what makes Era is USB does MIDI,
one green
and
cable,
power,
everything, one cable,
and then they talk and figure themselves out from a channel perspective, and it's super sweet. That's what it is. And they should open up that format. And what you were mentioning a while ago about how there's all these formats and we're getting so close to someone just putting all the pieces together. Roland is the most frustrating company because they are the only ones who actually have it out on the market and it works perfectly. And then they locked it down, so only they can use it. And so if you want to buy any other gear to use within that environment, you can't.
Could you imagine an IRA protocol that could be used by anyone? Oh.
So you mean if the guys at Ableton who developed Link were in charge of Roland, that would be what we would have, right?
Yeah. Yep, because they gave away Link, but Link just isn't quite there.
It's disgusting how many times I've had to use Link and how well it works when I don't even use Ableton. But
I've had zero issues with Link, but I don't use it all the time. I haven't tested it across multiple platforms.
And it doesn't do other things either. You can't take you can't take a few synth boxes and put them together with Link.
Sort of. It depends on which sync boxes.
Kind of do it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but if you're using anything with just MIDI in and out, you're not going to get that.
You can get
a cable.
You can get a MIDI interface. Yeah, you can get a MIDI interface for USB, and it works just fine. That's the thing that's so frustrating is that in many of my setups, I've actually run Ableton as the full-blown DAW that's doing literally nothing but being
just
duct tape.
Link.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is this?
Well, and it's
Era is just one cable, and then it figures everything else out for itself.
And the fact of the matter is, the only reason I was looking at getting the DJ808 again is because the fact is you can plug an MX1 into it and route the rest of your analog gear and your Ableton and everything else, and instantly your DJ session has become this hybrid setup with one addition. It's if the pitch faders were correct, and if it had a full 8 voices, and if Serato Pro came out and had all the things that it should have had a year ago, then perfect. You have the perfect controller. But if all those ifs don't hit the mark for me, I can't do it.